Part 1. Ashes and Thunder. The scent of blood was a hot, metallic weight in the air, a sickening counterpoint to the sweet, earthy smell of the wild mint wilting in Elara's lap. She sat on a hummock of dry grass, the prairie stretching out around her, a field of gray and brown, silent now save for the wind whistling through the skeletal remains of the wagon train. A silence that screamed. "Hold on," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. She smoothed the forehead of the man in her arms, a kind-faced, elderly carpenter named Mr. Davies. His vest was soaked crimson. His breathing was shallow, a rattling sound that was quickly fading. Elara's thoughts were disjointed, skipping like stones across a dreadful lake. A teaspoon of mint tea every hour for the fever, Elara. The mint will break it, child. The memory of her aunt's words repeated in her brain, like the busted rocking horse that clickety-clacked gently in the prairie breeze. Not more than an hour ago, Elara had been 100 yards from the wagon train, searching for mint and burdock root. She had knelt down behind a fallen pine tree to harvest the mint, and in that casual moment, she had been hid from view when the raiders came. Swift, brutal, a banshee of painted warriors on sweat-lathered mounts. Their blood-curdling screams of the devil himself split the peaceful afternoon. It was over before Elara could react, frozen behind the pine tree, clutching the handful of mint, eyes locked on her aunt's covered wagon. The Apache marauders quickly finished their evil rampage, then disappeared over the horizon as quickly as they had materialized. Only devastation remained. A child's rocking horse lay split near a wagon wheel, trunks gutted, their contents scattered like fallen petals, and everywhere there was death, and the wagons were ablaze. Only Mr. Davies had survived, and death was quickly catching up with him. Elara had to get up. She had to move, but her limbs felt like they belonged to someone else, heavy with shock. She gazed down at the herbs she had picked so carefully, her only reason for escaping the carnage. Now useless and limp, the promise of healing lost in a tide of grief. Mr. Davies coughed, a terrible sound that brought her attention back. His eyes, the color of faded denim, fixed on hers. "Tell my wife, the bluebird, she'll know." His head went heavy in her arms. Elara held him for a long moment, the warmth leaving his body with chilling finality. She lowered him gently, closing his eyes against the horror that surrounded them both. She stood then, her knees weak, and finally let the paralyzing shock give way to a fresh wave of terror. She was alone, stranded. The nearest settlement was weeks behind her. The nearest fort, 5 days' ride ahead, and she had no horse, no food, and no weapons. Then the ground began to tremble. It started as a deep, distant vibration, growing quickly into a powerful, rhythmic beat. Thunderous hooves. Her breath caught, lodging painfully in her throat. She didn't have to see them to know. They were coming back, or perhaps another group, drawn by the scent of the spoils, drawn by the fire that had to be seen for miles on the prairie. This time, there would be no escaping. The dense forest was too far away to reach, and the flat, open ground offered no cover. Frozen by a fear more absolute than any she had ever known, Elara sank behind the shattered carcass of a water barrel, her heart hammering against her ribs like a captive bird. The smell of smoke and soot filled her nostrils. She coughed and covered her mouth. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the wild, blood-curdling cry of the warrior who would find her. Instead, she heard a sound she did not expect. The steady, controlled cadence of a large group of skilled riders, but without the chaotic fury of the previous attack. She cracked one eye open. Her breath hitched. Before her were not the fearsome, painted Apache, but a group of warriors with deep red, unpainted bodies. They were tall, disciplined, and moved with quiet purpose. Their leader, a man mounted on a magnificent black and white pinto pony, stopped directly in front of her hiding place. He was a Comanche chief, his features sharp, his gaze dark and steady, yet his posture held a strange, watchful stillness. He did not look like a marauder. He looked like a sovereign. He surveyed the scene of destruction with a calm solemnity that seemed to absorb the horror without contributing to it. His eyes finally found hers, wide and terrified, peering over the edge of the barrel. He slowly dismounted. He was a man of impressive heat, wrapped in a blanket cloak, his presence radiating an authority that somehow felt protective rather than threatening. He took 2 deliberate steps toward her, pausing at the wreckage, and then extended a large, calloused hand toward her. "The fort is many days' ride," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that carried no malice, only compassion. "You will not survive here, Shamana, white woman." Elara stared at the offered hand. It was a choice between 2 fears: the certainty of dying alone in this desolate place, or the unknown fate waiting for her with a man who was supposed to be her enemy. Yet in his eyes, she saw only quiet promise. Her body, guided by a primal instinct for survival that overruled her terror, moved. She placed her trembling, herb-stained hand in his. His grip was firm and steady, instantly grounding. In one fluid, practiced motion, he pulled her to her feet and swung her up onto the back of his horse. The shock of being so close to him, the strange, warm smell of leather and smoke, made her head swim. He mounted behind her, his presence a powerful barrier against the terrible wasteland they were leaving. Without another word, the chief nudged his horse forward, and Elara was whisked away from the ashes, riding toward an uncertain future with her reluctant rescuer. Part 2. Fire and Silence. Part 2. Fire and Silence. The setting sun painted the western sky in strokes of violent orange and bruised purple, a stark contrast to the quiet dignity of the Comanche riders. Elara was acutely aware of the man behind her, Chief Kitchi, the breadth of his chest pressed against her back, his arms, firm yet respectful as they held the reins, creating a profound, unavoidable intimacy that felt both terrifying and strangely safe. They rode for another hour until the last light bled from the sky. Kitchi signaled a halt near a narrow stream, nestled in a copse of cottonwoods. A spot sheltered from the wind. The small band of riders dismounted with a practiced, efficient silence. Elara slid stiffly from the horse, her legs nearly giving out. She was exhausted, yet the fear kept a frantic energy buzzing under her skin. She watched the warriors build a fire and set up a small camp. They ignored her with a courtesy that felt deliberate, allowing her space to process her situation. Kitchi approached her, carrying a folded buffalo hide. His dark eyes met hers, and his gaze was steady and deeply concerned, lacking any hint of dominance or claim. "You are safe here," he said, his voice softer now, meant only for her. He laid the hide near the fire, a clean, dry pallet. "Sleep now. You have seen too much blood." He knelt by the fire and placed a strip of dried meat on a sharpened stick, nodding toward a clay canteen nearby. "Water, food, take it." Elara didn't move immediately. "Why?" she managed, her voice hoarse from disuse and fear. "Why did you rescue me?" Kitchi turned the meat slowly over the coals. "The Apache are war parties. They take lives to take land. The Comanche are travelers now. We take travelers to save lives." He looked at the devastation they had left. "It is not our way to leave a woman alone to the wolves or to the elements. You are under my protection." He handed her the warm, smoked meat. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. As she ate, the warmth of the fire slowly began to thaw, the icy shock gripping her core. She observed him. He was not dressed in the furs and fringe she had imagined a chief would wear, but in plain leather and wool, adorned only by the simple, powerful dignity of his bearing. He commanded the respect of his men, not through shouting, but through quiet authority. After she finished eating, he approached her with a small tin cup of steaming liquid. "Willow bark," he explained, noticing her questioning glance. "For the fear, for the pain you carry." She took the cup. The drink was bitter but soothing. "Thank you, Kitchi," she murmured, trying out his name. A slight, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Elara," he pronounced her name with careful respect, acknowledging her identity. "Tomorrow we ride. Before the sun, we go north to Fort Laramie. 5 days, as I told you." She realized with a dizzying clarity that this man, who her culture deemed a savage enemy, was offering her a gift more precious than any coin: safety, respect, and a path back to her. People. She curled up on the buffalo hide, pulling the blanket over her. The sound of the horses, snorting softly, the crackle of the fire, and the low, unfamiliar murmur of the Comanche. Language were the lullaby of her rescue. As exhaustion finally claimed her, she slept, the powerful, quiet presence of Chief Kitchi standing guard over her dreams. Part 3. The 5-day journey begins. The journey began under a sky still dusted with stars. Kitchi did not treat her as a fragile burden, but as a necessary passenger. They rode together on his pinto mare. The days quickly settled into a routine that stripped away the layers of Elara's preconceived notions. She had been raised to fear the Indian, taught that they were cruel, emotionless beings, but Kitchi was none of those things. On the first day, they covered miles of rolling prairie. Kitchi spoke sparingly, always in simple, direct language. He showed her how to identify the tracks of deer and coyote, pointing out plants she hadn't known were edible. He spoke of the land with a deep reverence, calling it Dine Bikeya, the people's land, not as property to be owned, but as a mother to be protected. "Why are you taking me to the fort, Kitchi?" she asked him that afternoon, feeling bold enough to break the silence. He turned slightly in his saddle, his eyes reflecting the vast openness of the sky. "You need your people. We need to travel without drawing the eyes of the army. But you saved me from them," she pressed, referencing the Apache. "They are broken men. We are not all the same, Elara. Not all white men are the same. Not all my people are the same." His answer was a simple, profound truth that chipped away at the wall of her conditioning. On the second day, the physical closeness of the ride began to translate into a deeper emotional proximity. When they stopped to water the horses, Elara slipped on the muddy bank. Kitchi was instantly there, his arms circling her waist to stabilize her. His touch was brief, yet charged. He smelled clean, of smoke, leather, and sun-warmed skin, a potent mix that stirred something unfamiliar within her. "Be careful, Elara," he said, his voice low. "I was clumsy," she admitted, looking down. "You were distracted," he corrected gently. "Your mind is still back at the burning wagons. Look forward. See the path, not the past." It wasn't just physical help. It was a lesson in survival, a command to reclaim her inner strength. That evening, as they shared a meal of freshly hunted rabbit, she found herself laughing when one of the younger warriors told a joke in broken English. Kitchi watched her, and the warmth in his eyes was undeniable. On the third day, they entered a rugged stretch of canyons. The conversation flowed more freely. She told him about her plans before the raid. Traveling to marry a man she barely knew. a necessity arranged by her distant uncle for financial security. "You would marry a stranger for safety?" he asked, a shadow of disapproval crossing his features. "It is what a woman must do," she said simply. "My world is not built on finding my own food or defending myself. It is built on security." "A security bought by giving away your spirit," Kitchi countered. "My world is built on strength. A woman does not need a man to buy her spirit back. She only needs to know she has one." His words struck her with the force of revelation. He saw her not as a fragile dependent, but as a person capable of great spirit. The man she was supposed to marry had never looked at her with such respect. The attraction was no longer merely physical proximity. It was a connection built on mutual respect and a dangerous, growing intellectual challenge. Part 4. The Language of the Heart. The fourth day brought a challenge that cemented the bond between them. A sudden, fierce prairie rainstorm. The small company sought shelter beneath an outcropping of rocks, but the space was tight. Elara and Kitchi were pressed close together, the damp smell of earth and water mingling with their own warmth. Elara was shivering, and Kitchi, without a word, drew his own heavy blanket cloak around her shoulders, shielding her from the driving rain. "You will be cold," she murmured, looking up at him. "I'm fine. You are the one who needs the warmth. You have been walking in shadows since the wagons." His hand, strong and calloused, rested lightly on her arm, a steady anchor in the chaotic weather. It was during this long, quiet wait that they spoke about their people. Elara spoke about the small, neat farm she had left behind in Ohio and the pressure on women to marry for stability. Kitchi listened patiently, offering no judgment this time. In turn, he spoke about the Comanche. He told her about the vastness of his people's territory, the Comancheria, and how the encroaching settlements felt like a tightening rope. "We do not hate the Shimana for their skin," Kitchi explained, his eyes fixed on the rain-swept prairie. "We fear for our way of life. The land is life. When you build fences and take the life from the earth, you take the life from my people. My people only seek a place to belong," Elara argued softly. "And we fight for the place we already belong," Kitchi countered, but his voice was gentle, devoid of anger. "It is a simple conflict, Elara. We both want a home." In that moment, she realized her captor and her people shared the same fundamental human desire. The space between them was not a cultural gulf, but simply a misunderstanding of how to share the same earth. His honesty was intoxicating. She reached out and touched his cheek, her fingers brushing against the rough stubble of his jaw. It was a gesture of simple, unthinking affection. Kitchi inhaled sharply, his gaze locking onto hers. He did not pull away. Instead, he leaned in, his own hand covering hers, trapping it warmly against his cheek. The silence stretched, charged with the sudden, undeniable leap of romantic tension. "I cannot ask you to stay," he whispered, his eyes dark with the struggle between duty and desire. and you cannot stay." "I know," she whispered back, her heart aching. The marriage she was traveling to, the security she sought, suddenly seemed like a prison compared to the exhilarating freedom and terrifying depth she found in the heart of this man. The rain finally eased, and the sun broke through, illuminating the prairie in a brilliant, fresh wash of green. The tension remained, hot and unresolved, between them. The 5th day was a study in profound, aching silence. The playful banter was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of their nearing destination. Each mile covered was a step closer to separation. Elara's gaze was fixed on Kitchi's back as they rode. She watched the powerful, rhythmic movement of his shoulders, remembering the strength of his hands and the kindness in his eyes. She was no longer afraid of him. She was desperately in love with him. She thought of the fort. She would be safe. She would be praised for her courage. She would be taken in, and perhaps still marry the man she had originally set out for. But she knew, with an absolute clarity that came only from truth, that she would never truly be home again. Home was no longer a place with 4 walls. It was the space behind Kitchi, riding on the back of his horse. As the sun began its descent, the air grew colder, and then, in the distance, a dark, low silhouette appeared on the horizon. "Fort Laramie," Kitchi stated, his voice flat, emotionless. Elara's breath caught. The journey was over. Her rescue was complete. Her heart was breaking. They stopped at the crest of a ridge, just out of sight of the fort's outer perimeter. Kitchi dismounted, his movements heavy. Elara followed, her legs shaky not from fatigue, but from dread. He stood facing her, the vast, fading prairie stretching out behind him. "You are a strong woman, Elara," he said, his eyes tracing the line of her cheek, a look of deep regret clouding his features. "Do not let fear define your life. Go to your people. Be safe." "Safe," she echoed, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her dust-streaked face. "I am safe here. I was a prisoner then, but I am a prisoner of a different kind now." He took a step closer, cupping her face in his hands. "I gave you my protection. I cannot give you my life. A chief must be with his people. A white woman must be with hers. The world demands it." His confession was the sweetest, most painful sound she had ever heard. The forbidden truth was laid bare between them. He leaned in, and the kiss was a promise and a devastating goodbye. It was fierce, respectful, and contained all the unspoken passion of the 5-day journey. The shared meals, the silent respect, the rain, and the cultural chasm that separated them. He broke the kiss, his forehead resting against hers, for one final, agonizing moment. "I leave you here," Kitchi said, his voice thick with emotion. "The men will wait until you walk down to the sentry post. They will see you. They will take you in. Go now, Elara." He stepped back, his face a mask of resolute composure. He offered her nothing but the clothes on her back and the strength she had rediscovered. Elara took a long, desperate look at the man who had stolen her heart. She knew she could beg, but his decision was final, rooted in the protection of his tribe and the harsh reality of their world. She turned and began to walk down the ridge toward the fortress. She did not look back, knowing that to do so would shatter her resolve. But after a few steps, she stopped and turned slightly, just enough to see him one last time. Kitchi had not moved. He stood mounted on his pinto, motionless, his silhouette a magnificent, lonely figure against the backdrop of the dying light. He raised his hand, not in a wave, but in a final, powerful gesture of farewell and respect. He waited until he saw the sentries spot her and rush out to meet her. Only then did Kitchi turn his horse. In a rush of hoofbeats and dust, the Comanche party vanished back into the vast, open land, leaving Elara alone but utterly changed at the gate of her old life. Resolution. Elara was led into the fort, where the soldiers and settlers were stunned by her story of survival. She told them that her rescuers were a peaceful party of Comanche heading west. She said they had found her after the Apache raid and had shown her only compassion, omitting the name of her chief. She was safe, sheltered, and hailed as a survivor. She was given a room and offered comforts. The man she was supposed to marry, a nervous, kind merchant, arrived a week later. When he proposed marriage, the very security she had traveled weeks for. Elara looked past his familiar, steady face and saw the vast, untamed landscape of the prairie. She saw the unwavering strength of a man who fought for his home, who saw her spirit, and who loved her despite the dangers. "No," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I thank you, but no." Elara stayed at the fort only long enough to recover her strength and acquire a single, sturdy horse. She had found a new kind of security, the fierce inner knowledge that she possessed a strong spirit, just as Kitchi had told her. She rode out one morning, not heading east, but north, towards the untamed territory that was Kitchi's home. She rode alone, but not in fear. She rode with the certainty that a captive heart might still be free, and that true love was worth the danger of the open sky. She was no longer seeking a safe harbor. She was seeking a reunion with the man who had taught her how to fight for her own soul.